Hello, I'm Chris Cuomo. Thank you for joining me here on NewsNation. Big day, big day. Earlier today, VP Harris and Governor Walz did their first real interview. I can tell you, I have sources there, and at CNN, I'm hearing there were no major blunders or blow-ups. But that's only one level of assessment, and a cheap one at that. I was told at the DNC that they would do an interview right after the convention, and they have. Okay, so there's one albatross removed from their neck in doing an interview. Do they need to do a lot more? Yeah. Should she be taking questions from us in the media at all of her stops? Yeah, she should. Now the focus is going to be how they did, right? Strategically, I think Trump and co. made doing an interview too big a deal and guaranteed Harris a big audience. And the suggestion that she isn't doing one because she's likely to blow it set a really low bar that I'm told she clears by any reasonable estimate. So she has three burdens. Don't screw it up. Feed us a diet of how you will make things better that matter. And give a nod to paying for them. More detail is better. She will likely not do well there. No politician does, but maybe we'll be surprised. And why your choices are what they are. What you're going to do, but how and why, okay? And you want to say as little about your opponent being worse than you as possible because we're sick on that. We have enough. Now, this bar of how and why is going to take us into the dreaded political terrain, changing positions. This is a place that has always bothered me as a journalist, but really even more as a grown-up, okay? The reason there is a price for changing positions in politics is twofold. One is good, one is really bad. The bad one is most common. It's just a cheap gotcha. You're a flip-flopper. This is just a feature of the two-party system. They changed, so they're dumb and not to be trusted. My problem with this is that it makes a potential virtue in life a vice. Often, especially in politics, changing a position to a better one is harder than holding on to a bad one. For example, when we finally have a review of the pandemic, what we learn about different protocols, about the virus itself, about its origin, about the vaccine, mandates, what we learn change the facts, may change feelings, certainly for me. Why? Stubborn adherence to a bad idea is not resolve, it's mere recalcitrance. The political sin is changing out of convenience, not conviction. That's when it's wrong. You changed out of convenience, not conviction. That's the stick that J.D. Vance got hit with. You say, watch out, this guy could be our next Hitler. Now you say he's the best president ever? Why? Why? What could have accounted for that change that makes it make sense as conviction and not convenience? Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor, one of the big names in the philosophy of Stoicism, put it even better than I ever could. If anyone can refute me, I will gladly change. Seneca, another big philosopher, said, an opinion that is widely held does not mean that it is a good idea. A smart person may change position, but not principles. See, and that's what I'm looking for. Harris has changed on things. George H.W. Bush, no new taxes. Then he gets in there, he sees the economy, he's working with the Democrats, he's got to raise taxes. By the way, it was the right call. Killed him politically. Why? The cheap gotcha. We've seen it again and again, okay? John Kerry was for the war, and then he campaigned against the war. Why? He didn't articulate it well. It's a problem. Trump had different views about reproductive rights, had different views about the Republican Party, right? Changed. Why? It's the why that matters. The problem is not the change. It's the reason. Can Harris articulate it? She says, this is interesting to me. Maybe it's too in the weeds. Tell me. My values haven't changed. You're going to hear her say in some of the clips I'll play for you that have been released. My values haven't changed on this. Okay. What does that mean? Because what I think she needs to discuss is not merely her values, but the principles involved that precipitated going from, for example, Medicare for all, to not, from no fracking to maybe fracking. Your values haven't changed. What does that mean? That you believe like in fairness, you believe in virtue, you believe in goodness? Those are values. What are your principles? What are the operative ideas that precipitated the change? That's the test for Harris. So this is what Harris had to say about her shifts. This is what I'm talking about.
The most important and most significant aspect of my policy perspective and decisions is my values have not changed. My value around what we need to do to secure our border, that value has not changed. I spent 2 terms as the Attorney General of California prosecuting transnational criminal organizations, violations of American laws regarding the illegal passage of guns, drugs, and human beings across our border. My values have not changed.
But yes, they did. You see, it's not about the values, okay? It's about the principles that led to policies. You can't have the porous nature of the southern border. Now, look, her defense should be, wasn't me. I'm the VP. We don't do anything. She's not playing it that way. Fine. There have been too many policy failures at the southern border to say your values haven't changed, because your values obviously weren't enough to suggest principles that had you push back on the administration doing nothing on the southern border until the very end of the administration. How does she explain it? And by the way, what is the new policy? How and why? How and why? Okay? Now, I want to bring in better minds to give an assessment. I will say this off the top. I'm going to hype this a little bit, but that's because of the Republicans. The Republicans put a lot of pressure on her to do an interview. I wouldn't have done that. We all knew she was going to do one. They got as much juice as they could out of how long it took. I'm not really that impressed with how long it took for her to do an interview. I just think now she has to do them and Walz has to do them regularly. And then if they don't, I think there's a better basis for criticism. But let's bring in pollster and communications analyst Frank Luntz, former communications director for the 2016 Trump campaign, Brian Lanza, and former national co-chair of the Bernie Sanders 2020 presidential campaign. She's got like 9 other titles. She's a very effective and efficient person. My favorite, Nina Turner. All right, it's good to have each and all of you. First of all, does anybody want to immediately jump on me and say, man, you don't know what you're talking about in terms of what Harris has to do tonight? Is anybody completely repulsed by what I said?
No,
Okay,
I agree that she
silence
has
as
to
accepted.
explain the why, and that becomes a challenge. I think that's why you see Republicans who've been asking for this interview. It wasn't to set the bar so low so she does it and answers a few questions, everybody's happy. I think the general view is that as she answers questions, she starts to lose support, because right now a huge amount of support is support from all different factions. They're just happy it's not Joe Biden. But once she starts to take policy positions, the view among Republicans is that, she starts to lose support because every policy decision she makes is actually unpopular with the Midwest. And that's why we want the interviews, because we want her to answer these questions rather than remain ambiguous, rather than having a staffer say she's flipped on fracking, on a Friday afternoon. We want her to come in and defend why she's flipped. Now, she says her values haven't changed. Listen, I'm from California. I know San Francisco values very, very well. I've elected people statewide in California. San Francisco values do not reflect American values, and they do not reflect Midwest values. So she's going to have a very tough challenge selling those values, but we want the interviews because we want her on record finally.
See, I think Americans share values. I think it's about how you put them into effect in policy. I think that's where people have changes, and also in terms of priority. But Frank, what do we know about the risks in politics of articulating positions? What helps you? What hurts you?
Well, my issue here is that she said my values haven't changed 3 times in that really short clip that you had. And I know what that means. I know that she was given that phrase to say. I know that it's a soundbite. I know that she's saying it, she's trying to emphasize it. And I hear that. And I've been applauding her communication, both her campaign and she herself. It's been almost flawless. And then I hear that and I think, oh, God, it's the same old politician. It's the same old approach. Some pollster, some media consultant put that phrase into her head to make sure she said it again and again as an answer to those who claim that she flip-flopped. So, Chris, I'm listening to this, and I'm actually disappointed because I thought I was going to be able to come here, and maybe the rest of the interview is much better, and say, this is what the American people want to hear. This is going to continue the trend that she's been articulating. But I can't do that just based on the clip that you showed.
Mm. Well, look, Nina, we both know values is a buzzword, right? Got to have values, got to have good values. Say you're a person of values, right? That's a typical character play. But for people like me and you who've lived the game so long, and for you who operates in communities, it's all about what are you going to do and how are you going to make it happen? Do you believe that that is the bar for Harris, or is the relative assessment versus Trump creating a different standard in your mind?
I think some of that residue effect from 2020 may be possible for her, but not totally. In other words, I do not believe that the Democratic Party can just simply continue to run on, I'm not Trump. And to Frank's point, too, the value word, Chris, yeah, it is a cover up. I mean, I hate to say it. Just be authentic, be real. What the American people want, regardless of whether they're on the right, the left, the middle, little country, little rock and roll, gospel, R&B, they want authenticity, and they do want to know that the person who wants to be the commander in chief will put their interests first and change material conditions. Now, we can debate how material conditions can be changed through policy. And Chris, you were dead on. What are the principles that lead to policies to say your values haven't changed, but yet you running from Medicare for all? That don't make sense to me. When 60% of the American people are living paycheck to paycheck, and most of the American people, whether they are right, left, or in the middle, do need relief. Medically, they need relief. Financially, they need relief. So I know she has to walk a fine line because she is in the current administration, but she still, Chris, she has got to show how she would lead differently and how her leadership would lift poor and working class people in this country from all walks of life, even before we get into the politics of who's conservative, who's liberal, and who's progressive.
And can I jump in for 1 second?
See, this is why I keep telling you. Yeah, hold on 1 second, Frank. This is why I keep telling you, Nina, that you got to run again. I wouldn't vote for you because I'm jealous and petty. But Frank, I want to play a piece of sound, and then you can... well, I don't know. We'll see. But let me play another piece of sound, Frank, and I'll have you respond to it, and you take it anywhere you want, because this is something that tweaks me a little bit. I think it's going to play well with people, but not with me. Play what Harris is suggesting is an extension of her values about how she would put together her administration.
Will you appoint a Republican to your cabinet?
Yes, I would.
Anyone
yes,
in mind?
I would. No one in particular in mind. We got 68 days to go with this election, so I'm not putting the cart before the horse. I have spent my career inviting diversity of opinion. I think it's important to have people at the table when some of the most important decisions are being made that have different views, different experiences. And I think it would be to the benefit of the American public to have a member of my cabinet who was a Republican.
Yeah, but the problem with that is
look, I got to tell you, Frank. Yeah, go ahead. Tell me.
That's a token. And I want to emphasize, because Nina is absolutely correct. It's not just authenticity. The number one value that Americans want right now under their elected officials is the truth. They want someone they can trust, because that way they can address all these other issues about the budget, inflation, Medicare for all, whatever the policy is. If you don't trust them, if they're not getting the truth, then nothing else matters. And it doesn't come across as authentic. And she just said right there, yes, I'd appoint someone. That's symbolic. If I'm bipartisan, or I'm partisan, but I want to show that I'm going to work with other people, I'm going to be specific, not about the individual, but about what I'm going to do. I'm going to ensure that every important, and she started to do this, that there is a diversity of opinion, a political and ideological diversity. Mm-hmm. Under this administration, there was diversity of gender, there was a diversity of ethnicity, but there was no political diversity whatsoever, and that's one of the reasons why Republicans got so angry. She had a chance right there to articulate that intellectual diversity is as important as any other measurement, but she did not. And I'm questioning now, I'm very careful about this. I'm questioning not just the authenticity, but the truthfulness of that answer right there.
Bingo.
Brother Lanza, let me bring you back in here. And, you know, I think about what this election is, and I've been saying the same thing, and please feel free, any of you, to push back on this, but Brian, specifically to you. My assessment has been, if this stays a grievance election, meaning people are going to express with their vote how angry they are about things, it's Trump's race to lose. But, and this I think was one of the concerns with putting so much hype on her interview, if people believe that the narrative that resonates most is what they'll do to make things better, I know you believe that plays to Trump's strength. I don't think it does. I think that he is not in the business of selling you better. He's in the business of telling you whose fault it is that it's worse.
Look, I would disagree with that, Chris, because you have to push back. Because if you look at the Trump economic record during, let's say, before COVID, and you compare that to the Harris-Biden economic record, that is him pushing back. That is saying how I substantially make your life better. And going to what Frank just said, what Frank Luntz just said about Kamala Harris saying she'd invite a Republican to her cabinet and how that just feels insincere. Yeah, I'll be clear. It was a lie. She had 3.5 years to work with Republicans on the border, in a bipartisan way, because it's such a critical issue to the country. You have this mass illegal immigration flooding the streets of all of our cities now. And she never held a single meeting. By the way, when she was Attorney General and we had this issue of illegal immigration in California, she never held a single meeting with Republicans either. When she made it a sanctuary state, she never held meetings with Republicans. So Kamala Harris does not have a history of working with Republicans. And so when she makes statements like that and sort of very passing in the token way that Frank suggests, it's a lot. Let's just call it what it is. And she has to get through the next 60 plus days. I assume she's going to continue to try to lie her way through it. I mean, you're talking about a 20-minute interview with 3 people. So that's 7 minutes per person if you take out the Deanna's questions. Like, that's not auditioning, and that's not trying to have a conversation with the American people. That's trying to run the clock out. And it's our job to make sure that she's accountable for her real positions and her values positions, which are San Francisco values, which I think everybody knows are dangerously liberal at this point. So that's her job.
I got you. Let me get a quick button from Nina on this. And again, Brian, I love it. We disagree. I think if it's who's a bigger liar, you got trouble. But Nina, what's your button?
No, I'm with you on that, Chris. That's what I was going to say, because President Donald J. Trump has been fact-checked over and over again. And so he has to look at the man in the mirror when it comes to telling lies. Now, the point about could she have worked with Republicans? Well, Republicans could work with her, too. Instead of trying to label her the czar of the border and have an I got you moment, let's just be honest that many presidents, of which she is not, she is the vice president, she's in the second chair, and she has to follow the lead of the person in the first chair. But let's be honest about several administrations and several Congresses have not dealt effectively and efficiently with immigration reform in the United States of America. Now, what she could do is say, I would do things differently, and then spell out for the American people how she would do those things differently. And if she was in the first chair, that she would work with Republicans. But Chris, Republicans had every opportunity. They turned down a immigration package that, just for political reasons. Just recently. So we're not going to play these games. Both parties, unfortunately, Chris, have an I got you moment.
There's no question, but that's because that's the game. It's two parties, zero-sum battle to the bottom. Langford helped negotiate that deal, and opposition is the currency. So they weren't going to do it. We're just not used to them saying it out loud. The question is, will the American people demand different and better? That's what I want. Frank Luntz, Brian Lanza, the one and only Nina Turner. I love you guys. This was a great panel. Thank you for coming here, disagreeing, but doing so with decency. We'll all watch together, and then we will reconvene. 4 minutes and 5 seconds coming up. Stephen A. Smith he keeps impressing me with being ahead of the conversation in this country. He was saying, hey, Harris has to do an interview. Harris has to do an interview. Before it was really, a thing. Now she has done one. What is the expectation of the moment? Stephen A. has been listening. Now he will make his witness. Next.
To not do one single interview, to not have one single press conference, to literally use rallies as a press conference. We let that slide for the last month.
to turn black recently for political purposes, questioning a core part of your identity.
Yeah.
Any
Same old tired playbook. Next question, please.
That's it?
That's it.
Is that the right way to play it? A clip from Kamala Harris's interview done earlier today. Stephen A. Smith said she needed to do one. Is this the one she needed to do? We're only getting the clips now. Let's ask him what the bar for satisfaction is. The host of the Stephen A. Smith Show, the one and only Stephen A. Good to see you, brother. What's the bar?
Good to see you. How you doing?
Who can complain?
Chris, can you hear me?
Oh, yeah, I hear you. Can you hear me?
Chris, I can't hear you. Yeah, I hear you now. I hear you now.
Oh, good. Good. Don't make my hair fall out like that, Stephen A. What do you think the bar is for success for Harris and Walz?
Well, for me personally, I don't want to hear about Walz. The reality is that he's the vice presidential candidate. We all know with presidential elections, you're paying attention to the prime two candidates. That's what this comes down to. And to be quite honest with you is that I'm not going to say anything was bad about her comments, anything was bad about her answers or anything like that. It was nice to see her sitting down, but why are you sitting down next to the vice president for an interview with CNN? You are the Democratic nominee for the presidency of the United States of America. This man has talked about you. He's questioned your ethnicity. He's questioned your intelligence. You know what your resume is. You're a former district attorney. You're a former state attorney general. You're a former senator. You're the reigning vice president of the United States of America. What do you need to sit down with the vice president for an interview with Dana Bash? Why? I don't understand that personally. It's not an indictment per se, but it's certainly something that raised my antennas, raised my eyebrows, because I didn't understand why that was necessary. There's a lot of things that she needs to sit down and answer because she's being accused of flip-flopping. People are questioning her values. That was the word that she kept using during the interview today. I think it was smart on her part to do that because when you mention the word value, most of the critics that are against Donald Trump don't believe he has any, worth noting. And so it was smart for the left to use that strategy in terms of her articulating the words value over and over and over again. But, Chris, I only bring up Walt sitting next to her because I cover sports, and I remember when LeBron James decided to depart from Cleveland to go to Miami, take his talents to South Beach, and there was such vitriol, and he was labeled to be such a pariah that his first year in Miami, there wasn't a single interview he did that year without Dwayne Wade by his side. We understood that because of the venom and the hostility coming his way, and he was growing into himself to be able to handle it. Last time I checked, that's not Kamala Harris's problem. And so for me, I'm looking at it and I'm saying, you didn't need all of that. It still comes down to you.
So, two things. One, refusing to, I guess you would say, dignify the comment with a response about Trump saying that you turned black and saying in explaining change in positions, my values haven't changed. Do those two tactics work for you?
No, it wasn't the worst thing in the world, but she's going to have to come strong because the reality is that what he's going to do is try to depict her as somebody who's inconsistent, who's devoid of principles, and who's ultimately weak compared to him. That's what he's going to try to do. And she has to come out swinging. She's got to go after him because you have to understand a lot of people in the world of politics believes he's one of the easiest targets you could ever have in American history because of the 34 felony convictions, because of the two impeachments, because of the civil cases, because of law issues still coming down the pike and what have you, along with some of his behavioral issues that have been well documented. He's considered by most to be a very, very easy target for somebody who has facts on their side, who has an education on their side, who has the ability to articulate their message in a profound fashion on their side. They're going to look at her, if not at this moment, eventually they're going to look at her and say, what's up? This is somebody you should be able to deal with. Take him out. You should be able to do it. Now, she's doing it now with the polls in terms of gaining traction. But I told you before, this is not a wave I believe she's going to be able to ride for but so much longer.
I think on the debate stage, I'm 100% with you. In terms of how to address him without him there, so making her own case, I believe that Donald Trump is the Teflon Don. I have never seen anything like it. All of those things that you just listed were all kill shots for any other politician. But with him, it's become a metaphor for lawfare. He's a victim in his base's mind. So I believe, and I'll see how she does it in this one, Stephen, but she has to say, not that why he is these bad things, she's got to make a case for better.
Well, wait a minute, Chris. Wait a minute. I respectfully disagree with you a little bit there, my brother. And here's the reason why.
Go ahead.
Because I understand he's Teflon, and I get that. I understand he's Teflon, but in the same breath, it's to her benefit to feed into that and focus on that. Because with people complaining about crime, with people complaining about inflation, with people complaining about the border issues, and we know what her positions were on that, and it's not the most popular thing in the world, then they're talking about, flip-flopping in terms of fracking, in terms of health care, in terms of the, clean green bill and all of this other stuff. You don't want to possibly get into all of that with him. This man is a stationary target right there for you to pounce on, and it's right up your alley because no matter what he says about your character, it's nothing compared to what you can say about his. And it won't influence his base, but it could potentially remind independents of the chaos that existed in his final year in office and how we may not want to repeat of that as Americans. She can feed off of that and pounce on him. That's what somebody is waiting to see when he comes up with his one-liners, when he's zinging you with insults here or there. Can you fight back? Jeb Bush, they said couldn't fight back. Marco Rubio, they said couldn't fight back. Chris Christie tried valiantly to do so, didn't work effectively. Nikki Haley tried, didn't work. Ron DeSantis didn't work. He came up with slogans and one-liners and all of this other stuff, and it was able to supplant them. But that was people he was going against on the right. The left, he lost the popular vote in 2016, lost the popular vote in 2020, okay? He could lose the popular vote again. If you're Kamala Harris, you know all of this, so go for it and go after him because you have the credentials to do so, and that's what America is waiting to see. Can you stand on your record?
Right. Well argued, Machiavellian, and I dig that. Here is the target that Trump has given her with his response to what he's heard so far from the interview. Take a listen.
Now, in all fairness, she did an interview today. She didn't want to go in alone. So she went in with this vice president guy that nobody ever heard of. And she did an interview with a very friendly reporter. We'll see. Maybe the friendly reporter, not friendly to a lot of other people. She was very fair to me. People just want to see if she can get through the interview. Nobody knows what's going on. I've done so many interviews in the last couple of months. As president, you have to be able to deal. You're dealing with the toughest, smartest, most ruthless people in the world. If you can't do an interview, we got the wrong person.
I got to tell you, you heard me say at the top, I think strategically this was a mistake. He set way too low a bar for her to succeed just by doing an interview. She did it. My understanding from people who have seen it is there's no big mistakes in it. So I think he set himself up for disappointment in terms of creating a low bar for her success. What's your take?
It's entirely plausible that he's setting himself up for disappointment because we believe what Kamala Harris is capable of. She's an educated black woman who is the reigning vice president of the United States of America. She's one of the final people in the room when it comes to President Biden making some of the decisions that he's made. If you're a leftist, you agree with it. If you're on the right, you don't. But look at what I said. That's why I threw my hands up while you were playing the sound. What did he say? She showed up with help. She showed up with somebody to support her. She couldn't even see it alone. We know what that's code for. He's looking at American citizens and he's saying, I'm strong. Look at the war in Ukraine with Russia. Look at some of the threats we have internationally. Look at what our geopolitics are like. Look at the problems that are going on in America. You need somebody strong in that position. We know what he's trying to get at when he does that. Now, you and I know that women are the backbone. You and I know that women are likely going to decide this election. You and I know, I don't give a damn what anybody says. The best part of a man are women. We get all of that. He's not preaching that language. What he's doing is trying to interpret and send the kind of message. She's not as strong and as resolute and as principled and as tough as I am. And with the times that we're living in, that's what you want. That's what you need, ladies and gentlemen. You need somebody strong. You need a leader that you can trust to sit in that chair and will defend America to the utmost. Is she that person? You got to make sure you, Kamala Harris, you go right at him and you remind him who the hell you are. You understand? You're the vice president of the United States. You're the former senator. You're the former attorney general for the state of California. You mince no words. You play no games. You're qualified. You're ready to roll and rumble with the best of them. And you don't consider him the best of them, which means you expect it, albeit tough, to be relatively easy for you to go heads up against him because you know what you made of. That is what the American people are going to say at some point or another that they want to see from her. That's all I'm saying. She can do it. I believe she will do it. I believe she can do it, but she's got to do it. You can't show up for an interview with the vice president when you know everybody looking for you. We didn't want to see Tim Walz today. We wanted to see her, and everybody and their grandmama knows it.
May have probably, I think it was a hedge condition, and it was probably a bad call given how it's being received. You get a big amen from me. As we used to say when we were growing up, long and strong, come correct. Come correct, long and strong. That's what we need to see from her. We'll see if she gets it done. Stephen A. Smith, I appreciate you. Even though you beat me on that point, your strategy would be better than mine. I'll talk to you soon. 4 minutes and 30 seconds. Right. Up next, president of Moscow, Idaho. Where is that? That's the town where Bryan Kohberger, residents of Moscow. Thank you, Dustin. Residents of Moscow, Idaho, the town where Bryan Kohberger allegedly slaughtered 4 college students. They're threatening to burn down the courthouse if he's acquitted. You know what that's going to do? It's going to make a case to change venue. And a hearing to have just that happen just adjourned. We have our man on the scene, NewsNation's Brian Entin, in the courtroom with the families. What's the deal? Next. Court has just adjourned in Moscow, Idaho. Bryan Kohberger's defense team is arguing, we can't have this trial here. Everybody here is against him. We have to change venue. The case, of course, the brutal stabbings, the murders of 4 college kids. Will it be moved to another county? Would that make a difference? Should it happen? Well, the residents have said if this dude is acquitted, we will burn this place down. That is not helpful to keeping the case there. So, can he get a fair trial? Will it be moved? The judge considered just that. NewsNation senior national correspondent Brian Entin has been in court all day. What is the 411?
Well, the decision didn't come, Chris. It was a long hearing, started bright and early this morning, just wrapped up a little while ago, and the judge said he needs to think it over. He said it's one of the hardest decisions he'll ever have to make in his professional career. That's the way he put it. The defense says there is no way that Bryan Kohberger gets a fair trial in Moscow. They said there's a mob mentality here. They said that there's been too much media coverage, that everybody knows about the case. And then they had an expert on today, Chris, who talked about something interesting, that there's a fear and intimidation factor, that even if they think they get a jury that is fair and unbiased, if that jury decides to acquit Kohberger, would they decide they're too nervous to do it because then they'd have to come back out into the community, people would know who they were, they would be shunned. They said that's another reason that they need to move it. Prosecution wants it to stay. Families of the victims want it to stay. They think it should happen here. I spoke to Kaylee Gonzalez's parents and brother about the reason they want it to stay, and also what it's like for them to be in that little courtroom, once again, so close to the man accused of killing their kids. Take a listen.
It's hard. It gets harder for me.
Is it hard? Like not to look at him, or do you try to just listen to what they're saying? Or?
I look at him. I especially when he walks in, I'll look right at him. I'm just dying for him to look over, make eye contact.
Do you think they could find a fair jury here?
We know they can, and we've actually asked and done interviews ourselves, and they have to find 12 people plus some people on the side, some substitutes. But yeah, they can find 12 people that haven't made their mind up.
Yeah, that haven't made that's not that hard.
And Chris, if they
Brian,
move the trial to Boise, it's about 5.5 hours away. No, he didn't say. We don't know how long it's going to take, but with the families, they're concerned, if they move it to Boise 5.5 hours away, they've got to uproot their lives. A 3-month trial, which it's going to be a lot for these families, especially if they can't even be where they live.
Yeah. Brian, appreciate it. Thank you for getting that interview. Thank you for getting the information. We'll see what the ruling is, and we'll reconvene at that time.
Yeah.
All right, let's look at the legalities. Randy Zellen has been both a prosecutor and a criminal defense attorney. So let's bounce the different issues here off one another. Randy, him saying it's one of the hardest decisions he's ever had to make, well, then he's had a pretty good run. Because if he makes a ruling that he believes it's fair, how hard is it to get a ruling like that overturned, and what are the factors?
Well, let's take a step back. I think I give the judge a lot of credit for being so honest, because truly, the easy decision is the difficult one, which is, okay, let's move it 300 miles away, more people, more of a likelihood that we can find 12 people and alternates who are not going to burn the courthouse down. That's the tough decision, because it also sets a precedent. But to your point, let's look legality. Let's look both sides of the aisle. First, let's start with the Constitution. We have the Fifth Amendment and the Sixth Amendment. The Sixth Amendment cuts both ways for both the prosecution and the defense. The good news for the defense is you are entitled to a jury that is going to be fair and impartial. Bad news, Sixth Amendment says we should try cases in the district, in the place where the criminal offense conduct took place. Then you have the Fifth Amendment. You want to take my life? You want to take my liberty? You damn well better give me due process. And then finally, we wrap it up by a very simple question. Pretrial publicity. Will the pretrial publicity so taint the jury, so infect the jury? Is it a reasonable certainty, a reasonable likelihood that those jurors now cannot be fair, cannot be impartial? And by the way, the negative pretrial publicity is not in and of itself enough. We learned that. Jeff Skilling will tell you how well he did in the Enron case. Great. Pretrial publicity, bad. Boo-hoo for you. You then have to connect it to the jurors like, I cannot be fair and impartial as a result of the pretrial publicity.
Yeah, perfect analysis. And also, that standard was created at a time before social media. The idea that you're going to find a place where nobody has preconceived notions about this is very slim. We'll see what he decides. I appreciate you breaking it down perfectly. Randy Zellen, thank you very much. Talk to you again. Up next.
Thank you.
How about you? You hear about Trump's questions? I got to tell you, they weren't bad. Why'd you come alone, right? Why do you want to build a wall now? Interesting questions. What would be yours for Kamala Harris? 844-968-7720. Let's get after it. All right, what do you got, Dusty?
I've got Virginia from Martinsville, Virginia. Virginia from Virginia.
Virginia, what's your question?
I would like to know why Harris cannot do impromptu interviews with the press without Tim Walz right there.
Yeah. First of all, shut that dog up. No, I'm kidding. You're right. It's a fair point of criticism. She shouldn't have showed up with Walz. She should do more interviews. Yes, it's been a compressed time period, but now she should be doing them all the time. It's a fair criticism. Let's see if she addresses it. Next.
Okay, next is going to be Ron from Lynbrook, New York.
Yes,
I would just be careful to not make it that she can't do it. Hold on a second, Ron. I would just be careful to not make it that she can't do it because she hasn't do it, although she's setting herself up for that to be said because she hasn't done it. But don't set too low a bar, because once she starts doing it, you'll create too low a bar for her to be successful just because she's doing it. She should have to explain why and how. If she wants to win this election, she's got to prove that what she can do is make things better, not just point to why Trump is worse. I don't think that's enough to win. Go ahead, Ron.
Vice President Harris, I would ask her, what would be her renewed policy on the border if she does win this election? That's what I would ask her.
Oh, 100%. Look, because it works 100 different ways. I don't buy this. You had 3 years, you didn't do anything. Vice presidents don't do anything. Okay, I don't mean to disrespect the position, but that's just the reality. Okay, it's the president's show. It's his administration. But now it's her turn. What would you do? And how would you do it? Why would you do it that way? How do you pay for it? How do you change the rules? 2 reasons. 1, you deserve to know how something can be made better instead of pointing out why everything is worse, right? And 2, that's her best way to win the election. That's what Trump doesn't do. He is selling grievance. She can't win on things suck. If they suck, they're your fault. Next.
Next, we're going to go to my favorite, Mr. Wonderful. He's been on standby for a while. No, it's Mr. Positive, not Mr. Wonderful. He's wonderful and positive.
Yeah, but he's your favorite, but you don't even know his name. Mr. Positive, what do you got?
Oh, my God, Chris, thanks for taking my call. Great show. Is it good to have the political party bring on the opposing party? I think it is, because I think what you're trying to do is overcome the game, and this is how we bring civility, and this is how we bring getting rid of divisiveness in this great country of ours. What say you, brother?
My problem, Mr. Positive, is I don't see Republicans as the antidote to Democrats. I think the duopoly of the two-party system is the problem. What I want is unconventional ideas. What I want is you to bring in men and women who know how to do things that agency does. You know, I want disruptors of the norms. I want people who come in with different ideas that they've done in the private sector, that they understand how to do, but they're just not the conventional choices who have the pedigree to move up into those positions. That's what I would want. I don't give a damn if the guy's a Republican or it's a Democrat. The parties are the problem, so I don't see them as part of the solution, and I certainly don't want to appease them for one another. Next.
There is no next. You have 20 seconds. Do you have a quick final thought you can do in 10 seconds?
There's always a next. Listen to the interview for better. What makes her better in terms of what she can do for you? Get away from worse. It gets us nowhere but to the bottom. That's all we got. Brian Enton, in for Dan, on the scene in Moscow, Idaho, after this break.